My name is Marin Callahan. I am 38 years old. I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, the second of three daughters of a high school history teacher and a woman who ran a small accounting firm out of the converted garage of our house on Dempster Street. Irish American on both sides, Callahans and Murphys as far back as my grandmother could trace it, which was not very far and which she considered a personal failing. We were ordinary in the specific way that involves everyone at the dinner table having a strong opinion, a low tolerance for complaining, and the absolute expectation that you would figure things out. I am a brand strategy director at a mid-size agency in Chicago called Foundry, and I have been in this industry for 15 years. I specialize in repositioning taking companies that have lost their story and helping them find it again. What that means in practice is this. I sit across from leadership teams that are spending enormous amounts of money describing a version of themselves that nobody believes, and I try to locate the true version underneath the performance. This requires a particular kind of patience. People resist being told their story is wrong, especially when they have been telling it for years. But the market does not care how long you have been telling a story. It only responds to whether the story is true. I am good at this. I have always been good at finding what is real underneath what is being performed. I want you to hold that, because what I am about to tell you is a story about exactly that. Except this time, the thing being performed was a friendship. And what was real underneath, it turned out to be something I had shared with her in confidence over dinner on a Thursday night in November. Her name was Tara. Before I take you into this, if you are watching this and these stories find you when you need them, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now let me take you back. I met Tara Merchant at 24 at a small brand agency on the near north side of Chicago. It was my first real job out of graduate school. 30 people in an open-plan office with too many feature walls and a coffee maker that took 11 minutes to produce anything drinkable. I had just moved from Evanston, technically 6 miles away, but psychologically a different country. And I was sharing a one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park with 2 other women, and spending an alarming share of my paycheck on a pull-out couch. Tara sat 2 desks away from me. She had been there 8 months already, which at 24 constitutes a kind of institutional wisdom. She was from Minneapolis. She was sharp, quick, funny in the way that makes everyone around her feel smarter. She wore excellent shoes and knew everyone's coffee order without being asked. Within 6 months, we were getting Thursday dinners. Within a year, she was the person I called when anything happened. Good news and bad news both. The kind of friend who already knows the paragraph before the sentence you just said. I want to describe what being close to Tara was actually like, because the description matters enormously for what I am about to tell you. She was warm in a very particular way. She remembered everything. Your mother's surgery. The name of the colleague who had been making your life difficult. The thing you said in passing 6 months ago that you thought no one retained. She held the details of your life with a quality of attention that made you feel, every time, genuinely worth knowing. This is not nothing. This is, in fact, a very specific kind of love, and it made her, among other things, the person I thought out loud with. The person I called when I had an idea still forming that needed another mind. The person I trusted with the unfinished version of things. I can give you a concrete example of what I mean before I tell you what happened, because I think you need to understand the specific quality of the trust. A few years before any of this, I was working through a difficult positioning problem for a financial services client. I had been stuck on it for 2 weeks, not unable to work, but unable to crack the central argument. I had tried 4 different approaches and none of them were right, and I knew they weren't right, but I couldn't see the version that was. I called Tara on a Tuesday afternoon, described the client, described the problem, described the 4 approaches that weren't working. She asked me 3 questions. The third question was the one. It unlocked the frame I had been trying to find for 2 weeks. I hung up and wrote the strategy in about 90 minutes. I told her what she had done. She said, "I didn't do anything. You knew it already. You just needed to say it to someone who was paying attention." That is what I mean when I say she was the person I thought out loud with. She was generous with her attention in the specific way that is most valuable, the way that helps you find what you already know. I trusted that generosity completely. For 14 years, I trusted it completely. That trust was the mistake, not the friendship, the trust, and specifically, the Thursday dinner in November. Let me tell you how the idea started. My work involves a specific problem that I have been thinking about for most of my career. Companies spend enormous money building brand strategies that are aspirational rather than true. They describe the version of themselves they want to be rather than the version they actually are. And the market, consumers, partners, talent, everyone can feel the gap. Not consciously necessarily, but the gap registers. Things don't stick. The story doesn't land. The positioning erodes. What I had come to believe, after 15 years of watching this happen and trying to fix it, was this: the only brand strategy that holds over time is one that is genuinely true, not true-ish, not true in 5 years, true right now, in the actual present, built from what the company actually does and actually is. The market cannot be persuaded to believe something that isn't real. It can only be shown something real and recognize it. I had been developing this into a full framework for about a year, testing it on client work, refining the language, looking for the talk I could build around it. Every year, a conference called Brand Forward holds a 3-day event in Austin, Texas. Not the most glamorous conference in the industry, but the one that people in my specific corner of it actually care about. The speakers are people doing real work. The audience is serious. The talks get posted to YouTube and circulate for months. Getting a main speaking slot there is, in my world, a meaningful thing. I had submitted a proposal the year before and been rejected. I had revised and resubmitted with the new framework, the brand truth concept, for the following year. In October, I received an email from the program director, a woman named Lena Marsh, saying they wanted me for the following April. I remember exactly where I was, standing at my kitchen counter at 9:30 on a Tuesday night in a sweatshirt, eating cereal from the box. I read the email 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, not dramatically, just because it seemed like the right response to something you have been building toward for 2 years finally arriving. I called my mother, then I called Tara. Tara said I knew it. Before I had finished my sentence, I knew it. I told you. She said she was taking me to dinner to celebrate. She said, "This is so deserved, Marin." I believed her completely. I had no reason not to. The Thursday dinner in November is the thing I keep coming back to, because it is where it happened. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have felt like anything other than what it always was: two friends, Thai food on Halsted, a bottle of wine, 2 hours of conversation. I had been working on the talk framework for weeks by then. The acceptance was recent, and the ideas were alive in me, the way ideas are when they are still forming, and you can feel them moving, but cannot yet see the final shape. I was thinking out loud the way I always did with Tara. This is what Thursday dinners were for. This is what 14 years of friendship had built: the ability to say the half-finished version of something to someone who would take it seriously and push it forward. I told her the core of it, the brand truth framework, the argument that aspiration is not a strategy, that the market can smell the distance between what a company claims to be and what it actually is. I told her about a retail client I had worked with 2 years prior, a mid-size outdoor apparel brand, whose repositioning had failed precisely because it was performed rather than true, and the moment I had identified the real story underneath and what that had done for the campaign. I told her the shape of the talk I was building. She was a perfect audience. She asked sharp questions. She pushed back on one point in the second section in a way that actually helped me, made me see that the argument needed to open rather than close at that moment. I remember making a note on my phone about it. We sat there for 2.5 hours, and I left feeling like the talk had gotten clearer just from saying it to someone who was genuinely listening. On the walk to the train, she said, "I think this is the best thing you have ever built professionally." She said it with complete sincerity in the particular way she had, looking straight at me, no qualifier, no softening. Just, "This is the best thing." I said, "I'm not done building it yet." She said, "I know, that's why it's exciting." I took the red line home, standing in the door area with my coat on, rereading the note I had made on my phone about the second section. I felt the particular satisfaction of knowing you are in the middle of something real. The idea, the talk, the framework, all of it felt alive and mine in a way that good work feels when it is still forming, and you can sense the shape it is moving toward. I did not think about that dinner again for 4 months. I spent 6 months preparing the talk. A speaking coach for 4 sessions, a woman named Gloria who had been coaching executives for 20 years, and who told me in our first session that I was someone who was used to being the smartest person in the room, and that this was going to be a problem, because the smartest person in the room mode closes the audience off instead of opening them up. She was right. I had to learn to give the talk in a different register, not from above the material, but from inside it. That shift took 3 sessions to get right. 11 full run-throughs in my living room. I timed each one. The talk came in at 47 minutes in run-through 1, 42 in run-through 4, 45 in run-through 8, and 43 in the final version. I had learned, after 15 years in this industry, that the audience can feel the difference between a talk that is 44 minutes of substance and a talk that is 44 minutes of someone managing their own nerves. I was trying to make 44 minutes of substance. A Saturday with my colleague Denise Obasicol, where she gave me 3 hours of notes and then took me to lunch, and the notes were exactly right. She told me the middle section, the part where the framework's central argument had to open rather than close, was still for me, not for them. She said, "You know this part too well. You're explaining it to yourself." I rebuilt it over the following 2 weeks. The rebuild was the hardest 2 weeks of the preparation. The original version had been the most intellectually satisfying part to write, and it was the part that was not working, and I had to dismantle it and find a simpler, more human version of the same argument. The version that came out of that was better. The version that came out of that was the one that made Vera Okonkwo quote it in public 8 months later. The talk became something I could feel the shape of from the inside, every moment of it, the way it moved through its own logic, where the audience would lean forward and where they would need to breathe. By March, I had one version left to write, the final version, the one I was going to give in Austin in April. And then, on a Wednesday evening in early March, my colleague Priya sent me a text. She said, "Hey, did you see this?" She had sent a screenshot, a LinkedIn post from someone who worked at a brand consultancy in Milwaukee. The post summarized a talk she had attended at an industry evening called Brand Currents, a small monthly gathering, maybe 60 people, held at a co-working space downtown. The summary was enthusiastic. It described a talk called Brand Authenticity in Practice by a Tara Merchant, senior strategist. I read the summary twice. The framework it described was mine. Not the words were different, but the architecture. The central argument, that aspirational positioning erodes because markets feel the distance between the claim and the reality. The distinction between strategy that is performed and strategy that is true. The retail example, an outdoor apparel brand whose repositioning failed because it was built on who they wanted to be rather than who they were. My retail client, my example, the one I had told Tara about over dinner on a Thursday in November. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. I put it down, I made tea, I picked it up again. I read the LinkedIn summary a third time very slowly. The outdoor apparel brand. That was the detail that closed the door on any alternative explanation. There are a finite number of outdoor apparel brands operating at the mid-size level that have gone through a failed repositioning in the last 3 years. I had worked with one of them. I had told Tara about it at dinner in November. It was a private client, not public information, not something that would appear in a case study or an industry article. It was something I had described in a restaurant on Halsted Street to a woman I had known for 14 years, over wine, while I was thinking out loud. There was no other way that detail was in that talk. If this story is reaching you, drop a comment below and type stage. It tells me you were here. I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't yet because there are more of these and they matter. Now let's keep going. I found Tara's talk. There was a recording. Someone at the event had filmed it on their phone and posted a clip to Instagram, about 6 minutes of it, the middle section where she laid out the core argument. The video had 214 views when I found it. I watched it 3 times. She had been careful. The language was different enough that a lawyer would have had a difficult time calling it theft. She had not used my exact phrases. She had not used my client's name. But the ideas were mine, the sequence of them, the logic connecting them, the specific retail example reframed as a hypothetical, the central metaphor about the gap the market can feel. These were the things I had said to her over pad thai on a Thursday in November, working through the half-finished version of something I trusted her with. She had given that talk in February, 6 weeks before my brand forward date in April. The event was small, 60 people, a co-working space, a Tuesday evening, not a conference, not a publication, not something with any particular reach on its own, but it was real, it was recorded. It was on the internet with her name on it, dated February, using my framework. I thought about what it would have meant if I had been rejected from Brand Forward. If my submission had not been selected for the second year in a row. The framework would have existed, out there, attributed to Tara, presented first at a small but legitimate industry event, on the record. And I would have had the experience of watching the idea I had developed over a year, that I had tested on real client work, that I had built into a full professional argument, watching it live in someone else's name, with my client's example embedded in it, just changed enough to be deniable. She had not been counting on me getting the slot. That was the bet she had made, that I would be rejected again, and that by the time I eventually found the clip, if I ever did, enough time would have passed that the sequence would be ambiguous, that I would have been able to see the similarity but not be able to prove the origin. The bet was wrong by a margin of one acceptance email. I sat with that for a long time, not with anger, exactly, not yet, with a kind of cold clarity. The kind that comes when something you suspected on some level without knowing you suspected it is suddenly confirmed. When a shape you could almost see resolves into focus. Then I closed the Instagram video and went back to writing the talk. I want to be precise about why I did not confront her. It was not because I was afraid of the conversation. I have been having difficult conversations professionally for 15 years. It was not because I was waiting to see what happened. I knew what I was going to do. I had decided within about 24 hours of watching that video, and the decision was this. I was going to go to Austin and give the most complete, most rigorous, most fully realized version of that framework that I could build, in front of 400 people, on record. Because the framework was mine, built from my experience and my clients and my 15 years of doing this work. And the only way to establish that completely and permanently was to put the whole thing on a stage and let it be seen. Confronting Tara would have made the situation about the confrontation. What I wanted was for the situation to be about the work. There is also this. I could not prove it in any way that would have satisfied a court or even a determined skeptic. The ideas were not written down anywhere she had signed her name to. It was a dinner conversation. My word against a very careful rendering. The argument I could have made was circumstantial. The argument the work would make was not. There was a more practical consideration, too. If I confronted Tara in March, the conversation would have been between us, private, unresolvable, he said, she said, in the specific way that benefits the person with less to lose. Tara had less to lose. She had given a talk at a 60-person industry evening. I was about to give a talk to 400 people at one of the most watched conferences in the industry. The leverage was on my side, but only if I went to Austin and built something undeniable. If I spent the next 6 weeks in a conflict with Tara instead, I would walk onto that stage carrying it. I would give a smaller version of the talk. I have seen this happen to people. The energy that should go into the work leaks out into the fight, and the work suffers. I was not going to let the work suffer. I also need to be honest about one other thing. During those 6 weeks, I continued talking to Tara. We texted. We had one Thursday dinner. She asked how the talk prep was going. I said it was going well. She said, "You're going to be great." I said, "Thank you." I looked at her across a table and I thought about what I knew, and I kept it inside me like a stone I was carrying and did not show her the stone. I am not proud of the performance of normalcy, but I was not ready, and I had calculated that the wait was worth it. I still believe that. I had 6 weeks until Austin. I used them. I want to tell you what it felt like to give that talk, because it is the center of everything else in this story. I am telling you because you need to understand what was on that stage while Tara's version existed, quietly, with 214 views on an Instagram clip no one was watching anymore. I flew to Austin on a Wednesday in April. The conference opened Thursday morning. My slot was the final talk Thursday afternoon before the evening reception. Not the ideal placement, people are tired, thinking about dinner. The energy in the room when I walked to the podium was polite and scattered. The room held about 400 people. I also want to tell you about the morning before the talk. I woke at 5:30 in a hotel room in Austin, made bad coffee from the room machine, and sat near the window watching the city come light. I was not afraid. I was something that used to feel like nervousness, but that I have come to understand is different. The particular aliveness the body produces when something that matters is about to happen. I sat with it for an hour. Then I got dressed and went to the conference. I gave the talk in 44 minutes. Around the 8-minute mark, the room changed. The shuffling stopped. The phones went down. There is a quality to a room that has decided to pay attention, a specific pressure, like everyone exhales at the same moment. I have felt it a few times in my career, and every time it is the same. The room decided to pay attention, and it kept paying attention for 36 more minutes. I want to tell you about minute 22 because it is the moment that mattered most to me personally, separate from anything that happened after. Minute 22 is the middle section, the rebuilt one. The one Gloria told me to get out of my own head on. The one Denise told me was for me, not for them. I had rebuilt it to be simpler and more human, and I had been uncertain about the rebuild right up until I was standing on the stage saying it. In minute 22, a woman in the third row, I could see her clearly. She had been looking at her program 30 seconds earlier, put the program down and looked at me. She didn't look away for the rest of the talk. I noticed this because I notice things like this on stage, the specific moment a specific person decides to arrive. She was the first person to stand when I finished. I will probably never know her name, but she is in the talk, in a way. She is what the rebuilt middle section was for. The final section, the one Denise had rebuilt with me on that Saturday in February, opened the way I had worked to make it open. The audience moved into it. By the last 10 minutes, the room was entirely still. When I finished, 2/3 of the room stood up. Lena Marsh found me in the hallway afterward and said, "I think we are going to get a lot of video plays on this one." She said it the way people say things they actually mean. I flew home Friday evening. Normal life reassembled itself. I was tired in the good way, settled. I did not contact Tara. The conference posted the video 6 weeks later. 90,000 views in the first 2 months. I did not post it anywhere. The conference shared it. Several people in the industry amplified it. And then it moved through professional networks the way things sometimes do when they say something true that enough people needed to hear. And here is where it gets interesting. About 3 weeks after the video went live, I started receiving messages from people I knew and people I did not know. The messages had a pattern. A few of them mentioned that the framework reminded them of something they had heard at a smaller event earlier in the year, a talk at an industry evening. One person said, Did you know someone else was circulating a similar concept? She described it. I said, tell me more. She sent me the Instagram clip. The same one I had already watched 3 times in March. Then something happened that I had not planned for and did not engineer. A prominent voice in the industry, a strategy consultant named Vera Okonkwo, who has 60,000 followers and whose opinion the professional community takes seriously, shared my video with a short note. She wrote, "This is the most complete articulation of brand truth I have encountered." Then she added, "For those who have seen other versions of this framework circulating at smaller events this year, this is clearly the origin. The detail, the depth, and the client evidence here make the lineage obvious." She had not talked to me. She had simply watched both things and drawn the conclusion that anyone watching both things would draw. The comment thread under her post ran for 2 days. Tara's Instagram clip went from 214 views to several thousand in 48 hours as people went to look at it. The comparison was not kind to the clip. The comments on Tara's version were the kind that a brand strategist, of all people, would understand the implications of. The market had seen both. The market had decided. I did not post anything. I did not comment. I did not send a message to the group chat or to Tara or to anyone. I didn't need to. I should tell you about the silence that followed, because silence is its own kind of information. Tara did not reach out to me, not when the video went live, not when Vera's post went out, not when the comment thread ran for 2 days and the industry spent 48 hours processing what it was looking at. I had not spoken to her since the Thursday dinner in March, since I had watched that 6-minute clip on Instagram and decided to go to Austin instead of to her front door. That silence had been mine to hold for 6 weeks. After the video, the silence became hers to hold, and she held it completely. I want to tell you what those 48 hours looked like from my end. The first time I saw Vera's post, I was at my desk at 11 in the morning, eating lunch at my computer, and I stopped eating and read it 3 times. Then I read the comment thread. 72 comments in the first 2 hours, then more. People who worked in the industry drawing the comparison openly, identifying what was derivative and what was original, discussing the difference in depth between the 2 versions. It was the public conversation I had known might happen and had not allowed myself to plan for because planning for it would have felt like engineering it. I had not engineered it. I had just put the work on a stage, and the work had done the rest. Our mutual friends saw it. Marcus texted me, "This is incredible, Marin." Priya, who had sent me the original screenshot in March, texted 3 words, "I thought so." Rachel called. She said she had watched the entire 44-minute talk and then gone to look at the Instagram clip after seeing Vera's post, and she said, "I didn't want to say anything to you in March because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I'm sure now." She said it quietly, and with the specific weight of someone who is also doing math on a friendship. They thought they understood. Nobody in the friend group said anything to Tara directly, at least not that I was told. I did not ask them to. I did not ask them to do anything. The situation had taken its shape entirely on its own terms, in public, in the professional world we both inhabited, in a way that I had not engineered and could not have orchestrated even if I had tried. There was nothing left for me to add. 3 weeks after the video went live, Tara posted something on LinkedIn. It was a general post about authenticity in marketing, broad and unsourced, with no reference to the earlier talk and no reference to me or the conference. It was the kind of post that reads, to anyone who has been following the situation as a person trying to reclaim ground that no longer belongs to them. It had 11 likes. I did not engage with it. About a month later, I noticed she had unfollowed me on LinkedIn and removed herself from the friend group chat we had shared for years. No message, no explanation, just gone. That was 8 months ago. We have not spoken since. I have spent significant time since then thinking about the actual structure of what happened. Not the wound of it, though the wound was real and I am not going to pretend otherwise, but the architecture, what it was at its core. Tara didn't steal my idea because she was stupid. She stole it because she was exactly smart enough to understand its value and exactly insecure enough to believe that presenting it first, in a smaller room, would give her something. Priority of claim. A version of the concept with her name on it. Insurance against a world where I got the stage and she didn't. She had watched me build things for 14 years. She had been present for enough of it, the calls, the dinners, the half-formed versions of ideas I worked through with her, that she understood what real work looked like while it was forming. She knew what I was building before I had finished building it, and she made a calculation. I think the calculation went something like this. The concept is good enough to present now in a room of 60 people. If I do it first, it's mine first. If Marin gets the confront slot anyway and presents her version, the versions will exist in parallel, and the earlier date gives me some form of claim. If Marin doesn't get the slot, the concept lives only with me. The calculation required believing that ideas exist independently of the experience that generates them. That you can hear the surface of something and replicate it without the 15 years underneath it. That the market, the 60 people in the co-working space, the 400 in Austin, the 90,000 who watched the video, would not be able to feel the difference. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding of what brand strategy actually is. The entire framework is built on the argument that you cannot perform something you don't genuinely have. The market can smell the gap between claim and reality. The irony of Tara taking a framework about the unperformability of authenticity and then performing it without authenticity is one of those things I have had to sit with for a long time without finding a word for it other than the obvious one. What she miscalculated was this: an idea performed by someone who didn't build it is a thin thing. It can pass in a room of 60 people at an industry evening for one night. It cannot survive being placed next to the version built by the person who actually spent 15 years earning it. The depth is not replicable. The client evidence is not replicable. The 44 minutes of full architecture that moves through its own logic and makes a room of 400 people stand up. That is not a thing you can approximate by listening to someone talk through it over dinner. She borrowed something she thought was an idea. What it actually was the surface of 15 years of work. You cannot borrow that. You can only try to replicate the surface, and the surface without the depth underneath it is recognizable to anyone who has seen the real version. Understanding that doesn't dissolve the anger. I was angry. I am, if I am honest, still something in the neighborhood of angry, not hot, but present, the low, steady kind. But the anger does not prevent me from also understanding the full shape of the thing. Both can be true at once. I have learned that accuracy and hurt are not in competition with each other. You can hold a clear and precise understanding of what someone did while also being genuinely hurt by it. I held both for 8 months. I am still holding both. They are different weights and they go in different pockets and you carry them separately. Before I get to the lessons, I want to tell you one more thing about what happened after the video. Something smaller than the 90,000 views and the comment threads in Vera's post, but something that has stayed with me. About 6 weeks after the video went live, I received an email from a woman named Sienna who introduced herself as someone who had been at Brand Currents in February, the 60-person co-working space event where Tara had given her version. Sienna said she had watched the full version of my talk after seeing it shared online. She said, "I was in the room in February when a version of this was presented. I thought it was interesting, but something felt thin about it, and I couldn't understand why. Now I understand why." She said she was sorry, as if it were something she had been complicit in. I wrote back and told her she had nothing to be sorry for, that you cannot always tell when you are in the presence of borrowed material versus the real thing, especially in a room of 60 people where the presenter seems confident and you have no other version to compare it to. The comparison only became possible when the full version existed. That is the thing. The comparison requires both versions to be visible. I put mine on a stage and let it become visible. That is all. I also want to say something about the friendship itself, because I think it deserves more than being reduced to the thing it ended with. 14 years is not nothing. The Tuesday afternoon, she unlocked a frame I had been stuck on for 2 weeks. The Saturday, she showed up at my apartment without announcement because she could hear in my voice that I was struggling and I had not asked for help. The Thursday dinners, hundreds of them, where we said half-finished things to each other and the things got finished. That was real. It was also, I now understand, conditional in a way I did not see. The conditionality did not reveal itself until a situation arose where she had to choose between protecting me and protecting herself. She chose herself, carefully, quietly, in a way that left her options open and left me exposed. I have thought about when the friendship turned. I don't think there was a moment. I think it was a slow accumulation of choices she made, mostly invisible to me, mostly invisible even to herself. A growing discomfort with what I was building and who was watching. A need to be level that expressed itself in a way she would not have been able to name as what it was. This is what makes it so complicated to grieve. There was no moment. There was just a Thursday dinner in November where I trusted her with something alive and unfinished, and somewhere between that dinner and February, she took it. Here is what I know now that I did not know before. The first thing, your most original thinking is not safe everywhere. This is something I did not want to believe because I have always thought out loud and I have always found thinking with other people more productive than thinking alone, and I do not want to become someone who guards everything in isolation. But there is a specific kind of thinking, the half-formed, still moving, genuinely original kind, that requires careful judgment about who is in the room. Not everyone who loves you is safe for that kind of thinking. Not because they will necessarily do what Tara did, but because original ideas in their early state are fragile and valuable, and most people do not understand that protecting them requires the same care as protecting anything valuable. I did not have that judgment calibrated correctly for 14 years. The second thing, the work is the only argument that matters. I could have confronted Tara in March. I could have sent an email laying out what I knew and what I believed she had done. I could have posted something on LinkedIn calling out the situation. I could have done any number of things that would have made the situation about the conflict between us. I chose instead to put 44 minutes on a stage in Austin and let the work speak for itself. Vera Okonkwo watched both versions and drew the conclusion in public without anyone asking her to. The industry processed it and arrived at its own judgment. When the work is complete enough and real enough, it makes the argument without you. You do not have to stand next to the evidence and point at it. You just have to make the thing good enough that the evidence speaks. I want to be careful here because I am not saying that going to Austin was easy. I am saying it was the right choice. Those are not the same thing. There were days in the 6 weeks between finding the clip and flying to Texas when the anger made it difficult to work. When I would sit down to refine a section of the talk and instead find myself replaying the dinner in November, the specific things I had said, the note I had made on my phone about the second section, the way she had said this is the best thing you have ever built professionally. I had to keep putting the anger down and picking the work back up. I had to do that many times. It is not romantic or effortless, this choice to let the work answer. It is just the better choice. It requires discipline. It is worth it. The third thing, duration is not depth. I have known Tara for 14 years. 14 years is a long time to know someone. I had treated the length of the friendship as proof of its solidity. What I have come to understand is that a long friendship can be built on something more conditional than it appears, and the condition may not surface until something specific triggers it. In Tara's case, the trigger was professional competition, the specific moment when my trajectory crossed hers in a way she could not reorganize around. When the situation required her to choose between protecting me and protecting herself, she chose herself, quietly, carefully, in a way designed to leave her options open. That is not a failure of 14 years. It is information about what the 14 years were built on. And the information, once you have it, is useful. Not comfortable, but useful. The fourth thing, some silences are complete sentences. I sent nothing. I posted nothing. I did not call her. I did not write a caption. The video existed. Vera's post existed. The comment thread existed. My silence in the face of all of it said everything I needed to say in the clearest possible register. I don't need to argue this. Look at the work. There is enormous power in not explaining yourself when the evidence is already doing the explaining. Most people feel the urge to narrate, to say, here is what happened, here is what she did, here is why I am right. I understand the urge. But every word you add to what is already obvious weakens the obvious thing. Say nothing. Let it breathe. Let people see it. And the fifth thing, the one I keep coming back to, the person who takes your idea without the years behind it will always expose the absence. They can take the framework. They cannot take the 15 years that made the framework true. They can present the surface. They cannot replicate the depth. The depth is the protection. The depth is always the protection. Keep building depth. Keep doing the real work, the long, slow, unglamorous kind that accumulates beneath the surface until it is undeniable. That is not just a professional principle. It is how you protect yourself from being replicated. You build something that cannot be copied because it is made of you. I am saying this not as someone who had a tidy victory. I lost a 14-year friendship. I spent 6 weeks carrying something heavy in silence. I had a dinner with Tara in March where I looked at her across a table and pretended that everything was normal. None of that was clean or simple, but the work survived all of it. The work was on the other side of all of it, waiting. And when I gave it the stage it had earned, it said everything. Here is where I am now. The speaking requests have come in steadily since the video. I have accepted 2. One of them is brand forward again. Lena called me personally. She said the video had brought in more proposal submissions than any previous year. She asked if I would come back. I said yes without hesitating. The conference talk video has crossed 90,000 views. I have received messages from people in 14 countries. Brand directors, consultants, agency founders, people who are early in their careers, and people who have been at it as long as I have. The common thread in the messages that matter most is not excitement about the framework, it is relief. People who have spent years trying to build something true inside an environment that keeps asking them to perform something false. They watched the talk and felt, as several of them described it, that someone had said out loud the thing they had been unable to name. That is what I was trying to do, name the thing accurately. The fact that Tara also heard me say I was trying to do that, over dinner in November, over pad thai and wine, and went and performed a thin version of it in a co-working space in February, does not diminish the 90,000 people who watched the real version and felt recognized by it. Nothing she did touched what the work actually was. That is the thing I most want you to hear, wherever you are watching this. A brand director in Seattle sent me a message on LinkedIn saying she had watched the talk 3 times and that the phrase about the market smelling the distance between the claim and the reality had changed how she thought about a repositioning she had been struggling with for months. She said, "Thank you for saying it that accurately." I thought about that message for days, not because of the compliment, because of the word accurately. That is what I had been trying to do. Say the thing accurately. That it reached someone I had never met and changed something for her is the version of success that I care about. Not the views, not the standing ovation. The accuracy reaching someone who needed it. A researcher at a business school reached out asking if he could include the framework in an MBA course on brand positioning. I said yes. I thought about Tara's 11 likes on her post about authenticity in marketing, and I did not say anything to anyone about that, but I thought about it. I am human. Denise and I had coffee last week. She said, "You know, when I gave you those notes in February and told you the middle section was for you and not for them, I didn't know how right I was going to be." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "The fact that you went back and rebuilt it is the reason the talk is what it is. Someone who was just trying to perform the concept would have kept the version they were comfortable with. You rebuilt it because you wanted it to be true." I thought about that for a long time. The middle section of the talk, the section Denise told me was for me, not for them, the one I spent 2 weeks rebuilding, is the section that Vera Okonkwo quoted in her post when she called it the most complete articulation of brand truth she had encountered. Not the opening. Not the clean, memorable closing. The hard rebuilt middle, the section that nobody would have seen if I had not been willing to take it apart and do it again. I had coffee with Rachel too. The first one where neither of us was being careful about anything or working around what had happened with Tara. 2 hours about completely other things, her sister's apartment, a book she'd read, an argument she was losing at work and knew she was losing. At one point, she said something that made me laugh hard enough to knock my coffee cup off the table. I caught it barely. We both found this extremely funny for about 90 seconds. The ordinary version of a friendship, on the other side of the thing that clarified it. That is what it looks like from the inside, when enough time has passed that you can just be in the room together without managing anything. That is what I am living in now. That is where I am. 38 years old, brand strategy director, Lincoln Park apartment with good north-facing windows, and a speaking engagement in Austin next April. A life that has been, in the last 8 months, very specifically and quietly itself. The work is there. The people who matter are there. The thing that was taken from me turned out to be untakeable because what made it valuable was the 15 years underneath it. Those are still mine. They were always only mine. That is what I want to leave you with more than anything else. What you build from real experience and real time and real failure cannot be taken. It can be borrowed from the outside. It cannot be held from the inside by anyone who did not live it. Keep building, do the real work. Let the depth accumulate. It is the only protection you will ever need. One more thing before I go. I think about the note I made on my phone on the Thursday night in November. The note about the second section, the insight that came out of talking to Tara, the thing she helped me see. I still used that insight in the talk. I did not remove it when I found out what she had done. It was a real insight, and it made the talk better, and the source of it being complicated did not make the insight less true. I kept it. I rebuilt the section around it properly. And the rebuilt section is the one that made the woman in the third row put down her program at minute 22. That is perhaps the strangest and most honest thing I can tell you. The person who eventually betrayed the work also, briefly, helped make it better. Both things are true. I am not going to choose between them to make a cleaner story. The clean version would be less accurate, and accuracy is what I am here for. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone take something you built, an idea, a concept, something you created in private and trusted to the wrong person? Tell me what you did with it afterward. Tell me how it came back to you. Tell me what the work cost and what it gave back. I will be reading. I always am. And if this story found you at the right moment, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me where you are. This channel is built for exactly you.